Welcome to the U.S.-Japan Council and the first in our 3-month Japan Perspective Series, Energy, Climate, and Environmental Sustainability in the Biden&Suga administrations. I'm Suzanne Basala, and I'm President and CEO at the U.S.-Japan Council. First, I'd like to cover some logistics. This session will be conducted in English, but Japanese interpretation is available by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, for those of you who are new to USJC, the U.S.-Japan Council develops and connects global leaders to create a stronger U.S.-Japan relationship. We're an organization whose members believe people-to-people relationships are the most powerful way to bring together leaders in the U.S. and Japan to address and create solutions to mutual concerns. You can learn more by visiting our website or by following the URL in the chat box. Of course, today's session would not be possible without our many sponsors. I would like to offer our sincere appreciation to our platinum sponsors, Babbitt and the Ford Foundation. I would also like to thank our title sponsors, Central Pacific Bank, Hitachi, Ito-En, Mitsui, MUFG, the Terasaki Nibei Foundation, and the Toyota Research Institute, who has their 5-year anniversary tomorrow. Congratulations, TRI. I'd also like to thank our signature sponsors, which you can see displayed on this slide. We are so grateful for their support in helping to make programming like this and the programming you see all year long possible. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the many companies and individuals who make up our premier sponsors, and we recognize their generosity. We're proud of this diverse group of supporters, and we couldn't be here without them. So let's just take a moment to see the sponsors and individuals who make up our premier sponsors. And I would like to introduce today's topic, which is about climate change. And just the other day in one of our webinars, our speaker said, climate change may be our next pandemic. And that really got me thinking differently about the threat of climate change. Like COVID, climate change can reach all corners of the globe with devastation that aggravates the inequality that already affects many communities. Businesses can be crippled or undone by unintended consequences. And at the same time, new business models can emerge as we adapt and address the sources of disruption. As with the current pandemic, an effective response requires data-driven information sharing, urgency, and innovation, pushing us beyond our comfort zones. And how each nation addresses policies within its borders matters profoundly to its own people and to others around the globe. Ensuring environmental sustainability requires coordinated, concerted efforts. No one nation can address the impact of climate change alone. And perhaps most important among all the parallels that we can draw, leadership will matter. So today we will look at these issues with an eye on how President Biden and Prime Minister Suga are stepping up as leaders in their new administrations. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this dialogue, Lorraine H. Akiba. Lorraine is a USJC Council leader and President and CEO of LEJ Ventures, a consultancy firm in Hawaii that's providing advisory services, including regulatory policy and technical expertise for regulated industry sectors such as energy, water, telecommunications, and transportation, as well as policy and analytical expertise for the development of corporate ESG goals and metrics, which is really top of mind for so many of us these days. She previously served as a commissioner on the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission and continues to remain active with the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners International Committee. And Lorraine, that is a mouthful. We're delighted to have her moderate today's discussion on the future of energy, climate, and environmental sustainability in the United States and Japan. So I would like to welcome Lorraine to the screen, and she'll introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's definitely an honor to be in the kickoff session for USJC's Japan Perspectives webinar series and on such an important topic of energy, climate, and environmental sustainability. We have a great panel of experts, international experts today, Christine Harada and Dr. Ken Koyama. But before I introduce them, I wanted to say that it's quite auspicious, actually, and serendipity that Hawaii, I am from Hawaii, and really Hawaii is really part of that effort. Hawaii is an island state in the middle of the Pacific and part of the community that has had a lot of economic and cultural sharing with Japan. And in fact, on the issue of climate change, Hawaii being an island state, like many of the island communities in the Pacific Rim, is at ground zero for climate change with sea level rise and many of the severe weather impacts that come from climate change with hurricanes in the Pacific. But what distinguishes Hawaii is we were the first state in the United States to adopt a 100% renewable energy mandate by 2045 for the electric sector, and most recently 100% decarbonization goal as well by 2045. And we were among the first states and cities to pledge and join the Paris Climate Accord back in 2016 to pledge our individual state actions. So it is very auspicious that we are here today and looking forward to hearing from our speakers. So let me introduce them. Ms. Christine Harada is a climate and impact investor with significant over 20 years of experience in consulting in the financing area as well. She is currently a member of the Executive Council for Clean Energy for Biden. But let me give you a little bit of her background. She was formerly president of IX Investments, a capitalized holding company that invests in critical areas of energy, green real estate development, affordable housing, sustainability areas. And she also was a partner with Ridgelane LP, a triple bottom line advisory that creates sustainable social value by bridging the gap that exists between private companies' investment capital and government. She is also a fellow with the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. Now, before returning to the private sector, Ms. Harada also served as the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer for the Obama administration. And in this role, she provided oversight for all sustainability-related initiatives across the federal government in energy fleet acquisitions and in game-changing improvements. She also previously served she was acting chief of staff in U.S. General Services Administration, where she was responsible for overall operations supporting 12,000 federal workers with an annual operating budget of $26 billion. She also has extensive years in management consulting with the Boston Consulting Group and Booz Allen Hamilton as well, and has a significant background in MA in International Studies and MBA in Finance from the Lauder Institute in the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And she also holds an MS in Aeronautics and Astronautics as well. So definitely a role model for women in STEM and disciplines. Dr. Ken Koyama also is a very distinguished international expert. He is currently the Senior Managing Director, Chief Economist of the Strategy Research Unit for the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan. He has held many senior positions, including he is a honorary associate for the Center for Energy and Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy at the University of Dundee. He currently also serves as a visiting professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy for the University of Tokyo and is an adjunct professor at the Institute of Innovative Research for the Tokyo Institute of Technology. Dr. Koyama is known for his expertise in energy security issues and the geopolitics of energy. He has been featured on numerous broadcasts on BBC, NPR, and other international venues. He also is appointed as the director of the Japan Electric Power Exchange, also known as JEPX, and serves on the International Advisory Board of the Energy Academy of Europe in the Netherlands, and is an international advisor and the chair in energy economics at the Energy Commission of Tenaga National University in Malaysia. So we have a very, very distinguished, experienced panel of experts today. And hot off to, I don't know if it was again another serendipitous event, but today President Biden issued his executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And on that note, let me turn it over to Christine Herrada, who will give you her perspectives with this hot breaking news, as well as many other interesting information about the Biden administration.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me, and especially to the U.S.-Japan Council. I'm very excited to be here with everybody, and especially as to Lorraine's point on this, what I think is a super auspicious day with the announcement of the climate change executive orders, following on, of course, his day one actions with respect to re-entering with the Paris Agreement and conducting an immediate review of a lot of the harmful rollbacks of standards during the previous administration. And the executive actions today really builds upon the ambitious goals that he had set out in his campaign, as you may have heard during that time frame, and really setting a path for the American economy, and hopefully also with respect to the global economy as well, to tap into the talent, innovation that we've got with our, within the workers in this country, but also revitalizing the overall energy sector, conserving resources, et cetera. Just as a broad overview, so excited about this. So there are 7 big points within the overall executive order. Just to cover them really quickly. So number 1, he comes out and declares the climate crisis in both U.S. foreign policy and national security considerations. He takes a whole of government approach to the climate crisis, of course, establishing formally the Office of Domestic Climate Policy. We're going to leverage the federal government's footprint and buying power to lead by example. Federal footprint, of course, is rather substantial. We're the world's largest consumer of energy, world's largest buyer of goods and services. Rebuilding our infrastructure for sustainable economy. That's been a long time issue for us here in the United States. Advancing conservation, revitalizing energy communities. That is a big deal for President Biden and Vice President Harris. And last but not least, securing environmental justice and helping to spur economic opportunity. And so, really trying to address the 4 big crises that we've got before us, here in the U.S. and perhaps in many other places around the world as well. I thought it might make sense to just give a couple more remarks with respect to what all is actually in President Biden's Build Back Better plan. Fundamentally, there are 4 big pillars, right? Number 1, we want to mobilize U.S. manufacturing and innovation. Number 2, we want to build a modern infrastructure and a clean energy future. Thirdly, building out a 21st century caregiving and education workforce. It's been a big issue for us, been culminating over the last couple of decades. And certainly last but not least, advancing racial equity and closing the wealth gap. I think there's obviously been a number of media reports with respect to the rising disparity in income and inequality in the United States. It's certainly been rising since the 1970s, and so it's come to a head at this point where we really need to help address that. Just to dive in to 2 of the areas that I think are more pertinent for this conversation today. First is around manufacturing and innovation, ensuring that we are mobilizing our American manufacturing base and innovation to ensure that, we are building out our economy. I think it's certainly something that we saw and felt painfully so during the pandemic, as we saw a lot of our supply chains really candidly break down, not with respect to just PPE, but a whole bunch of other ancillary goods and services as well. So 4 points here is focused on buying again, building out manufacturing, killing our bigger, building out on a first century works, of course, transitioning to a clean economy. Folks will be able to do a new job, fantastic. Many folks will have to may end up having to lose jobs in addition to themselves. Can we do that in a way? By investing in credentialing programs, partnering with universities and community colleges, et cetera, to help make that transition a lot more manageable and tamp down the anxiety. And last but not least, of course, investing in the research and development to focus on the crisis with respect to a lot of technologies and industries that are already currently in play, but further building out on that portfolio. And for my last slide, just a quick focus on infrastructure and clean energy. I don't think it's a big secret. Our infrastructure here in the United States has been the greatest for years. I look at a lot of the transportation infrastructure in Japan with great admiration. And so, certainly leaning in and building more out of that kind of infrastructure. So around clean energy, transportation, and broadband. Of course, one of the issues for us in the States is massive digital divide, not just within the lower income communities, but especially in rural communities as well. And so, ensuring that we're actually leveling the playing field for everybody here in the United States is a big area of focus for the Biden administration. With that, let me stop there and turn it back over to Lorraine so that we can hear from Dr. Koyama.
Thank you, Christine. Dr. Koyama, are you ready to go? I've already introduced you, so I know everybody's waiting to hear your perspectives. And given the new Suga administration, it's a new beginning for Japan as well. With Prime Minister Suga, it is a brand new day as well. So people are waiting to hear from you, Ken. So if you can just go ahead, proceed, since we want to make sure we have ample time for dialogue and questions.
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much for your kindest word. And first of all, that a very good morning from Tokyo, and also very good evening to those who are attending in the US time zone. My name is Ken Koyama from IEJ. I'm very happy to join this webinar, and I'd like to thank US-Japan Council for inviting me to this very timely and very important event. So let me start sharing my slide. I hope that you can see my slide. Firstly, that as Lauren pointed out, that the executive order just released by the President Biden was very, very impressive and very important. And also, this morning, I noted that the Japanese media, NHK, told me that this early morning, there was a second telephone meeting between Mr. Biden and Mr. Suga to discuss the various important issues surrounding the two countries, including the climate change crisis. So I think that as two countries now share that long-term common goal to achieve the carbon neutrality in the year 2050, I think that there are many, many ways that we can enhance our collaboration to make things better for the two countries as well as for the global community. But firstly, that I'd like to briefly touch upon what is happening now, or what is the situation for Japan in terms of energy and the climate challenge for us. As you know, that Japan is a large-scale energy consuming importing country. And in terms of primary energy, we are the fifth largest consumer after China, United States, Russia, and India. But in terms of oil, we're the third largest. And in terms of the LNG, liquefied natural gas, we are still the #1 consumers. Well, in a sense that we are very much dependent on fossil fuel. That's why that the carbon neutrality target is really challenging. And to do that, I think that it is quite important to further enhance the innovation and further enhance the international collaboration, particularly with the important ally, United States. At this moment, the government of Japan has a very important energy mix target for the year 2030. If we can successfully achieve this target, we can reduce the GHG emission by 26% as compared to the 2013 level. But to achieve this, we need to further enhance the better use of nuclear power in a safe way. But as you know, after the Fukushima crisis, there are lots of uncertainties for the future of nuclear power. And also there is a numbers of energy-related challenges listed here, starting from the security of supply of fossil fuel, which is a primary main source of Japanese energy supply, and also the improvement of economic feasibility of renewable energy and energy efficiency promotion is very, very important. Also, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in Japan also makes things more complex and more challenging. And under the circumstance, we are now in the process of revising our next strategic energy plan, SEP. And the strategic energy plan is the most important, most basic energy policy document of Japanese government, which is normally revised in every 3 years. The last strategic energy plan was revised and cabinet approved in the year 2018. So now we are in the process of revising this SEP. And clearly, to revise the SEP, one of the key issues is how to simultaneously achieve our energy-related, energy environmental goal, namely energy security for Japan, environmental protection, including climate change, and also the economic efficiency. So that the simultaneous achievement of 3E with the safety, that the new element after Fukushima, is a key concept that Japanese government is pursuing now. But as Lorraine pointed out, there's one big movement which we can observe was the last October that the Prime Minister Suga clearly announced that Japanese desire and aspiration to achieve the carbon neutrality in the year 2050. And this 2050 carbon neutrality target set the baseline for this ongoing revision of strategic energy plan for Japan. And we are hoping that this revision can be made within this year, but I firmly believe that to meet this very important target, that innovative technology for every aspect of energy-related area need to be emphasized. Otherwise, it's too hard. This is very, very much simply based on the true fact, their fact, that we are now heavily dependent on fossil fuel supply to run our economy. Almost 90% of our energy needs are covered by fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal. And this is true in Japan, but this is also true in the United States, and this is true for European Union, China, every country. So if we really want to achieve that carbon neutrality, probably that very big, substantial energy transition is needed, where the innovative technology need to play a very important role. That's why I do believe that Japan need to make our own serious effort. United States will need to make a serious effort, but bilaterally we can cooperate in terms of enhancing the innovative technology and diffusion of innovative technology to the world to contribute to the global climate change, to address the global climate change crisis. And in this respect, of course, energy efficiency promotion is a key, and renewable energy promotion and nuclear power utilization is very important. And for these areas, innovation, advanced technology improvement will be the key. But at the same time, that now the government of Japan is paying a great attention to the area of decarbonization of fossil fuel as well. What that means, for example, put it very simply, if we can successfully produce and use that CO2-free hydrogen from fossil fuel, like from natural gas, from oil or whatever, it will contribute to reduce GHG very, very significantly while using that existing infrastructure and technology. That's why government of Japan is paying a great attention to enhance international cooperation to build an international supply chain of blue hydrogen or whatever. And in this respect, I'd like to share one point, a very important point for me, that last September, Saudi Arabia and Japan made a first shipment of blue ammonia to Japan. And why it's important? Blue hydrogen is a very nice idea, but it's very, very costly at this moment because of the need to use that new infrastructure, new facility, everything. But if we go on the blue ammonia option, we can best utilize the existing facility, existing technology, and existing infrastructure, which can reduce that transition cost substantially to achieve that carbon neutrality goal. Of course, it is very early stage, but we are very working hard for this international cooperation. And in this respect, I think that there are many ways that the United States and Japan can work together. This is again simply because that we are very important ally in various fields, and now energy climate area is a common challenge for the two nations, again the bilaterally and also multilaterally and regionally. Lastly, that I think that to address this issue to with a more wide eye to diffuse this effort to the free, open Indo-Pacific or Asian region is a key issue for the U.S.-Japan collaboration. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken, for that very comprehensive overview of what is going on in Japan with with climate, energy, and environmental sustainability under the Suga administration. Many of these things were already started in Prime Minister Abe's administration, but it's good to see that continuity. I think one of your main points at the end, it's really important, the international cooperation in particular, and it's kind of a good segue for my first question, because we're going to have a little bit of dialogue now before we get to the Q&A from some of the audience members who have been putting that into our Q&A chat box. But if perhaps, Christine, if you could address, as I said, the executive order from President Biden today, front and center. The first part said, putting a climate crisis at the center of United States foreign policy and national security. So front and center, first thing on the executive order on the first page, and it fits right nicely into what Ken just said about the need for international cooperation and for a kind of a re-energizing, pardon the pun, of the U.S.-Japan cooperation and the efforts through USAID, through the U.S. State Department in the past in the Asia-Pacific region, and particularly in Southeast Asia. So could you comment, Christine, and then we'll have Ken comment as well with some of the specifics.
Yeah, sure. And again, I have just such unbridled excitement about these executive actions for today. I'm just so thrilled to see them, centering the climate crisis in both our U.S. foreign policy and national security considerations, as the president had laid out today, really affirms that in implementing and building on the Paris Agreement's objectives, that the U.S. will exercise its leadership, to help promote a significant increase in global ambition. It also announced a Leaders Climate Summit on Earth Day, kind of underscoring, if you will, that we are re-engaging once again with all the nations of the world. And also we'll kick off the process, of course, from a technical perspective of our nationally determined contributions that we're required to submit to Paris, or in alignment with the Paris Agreement, if you will. But he also then took it into a little bit more of a security realm, right, which is in, helping to prioritize security, the climate crisis as indeed a security topic, right? It also directed the Director of National Intelligence to prepare what's called a National Intelligence Estimate on all of the security implications of climate change. And I think that is a very big both signal as well as a beginning and a launch point for thinking through in a much more systematic manner what are all the things that really should be thinking about with respect to the crisis.
Yeah, and Ken, I think you had mentioned earlier in some of our pre-panel preparation that there had been a lot of collaboration together, and I know you have a great, strong background in the geopolitical side of energy. So we in terms of the export of technology, American technology in the renewable energy area, we were leading globally. I mean, this is an industry that America has developed and continues to excel in. So it could be an export technology. But Ken, could you address some of that in terms of how you see, given the geopolitical mix and the concerns, U.S. and Japan are allies, as you mentioned. We also are part of RIMPAC. We know that in Hawaii from many of the shared national security and global security measures that we undertake together. But maybe if you could address some of that specifically, some of the programs that you know and you participated in and that continue or could be again strengthened given President Biden's executive order and policy.
Okay, Ren, thank you very much for your great question. Yeah, of course, I totally agree that in some of the area of technology cooperation, that the sensitivity remains because of the ongoing kind of technology hegemony or technology supremacy. But my point here is if we really want to see the achievement of carbon neutrality, I do believe we need a strong enhancement of technology development and technology diffusion. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to see the successful achievement of carbon neutrality. And the United States has its own advantage and strengths, and Japan has its own strengths and advantage. So both countries can build up a kind of complementary relationship. For example, now I note that the Biden administration is paying attention to the possible enhancement of technology regarding the nuclear power, like SMR, small modular reactor, which is also a very important issue for Japan as well. And also, Japan is known as a front runner of energy efficiency technology, particularly after the 1970 oil crisis. Japanese government and industry, consumer, every people made a serious effort to make Japan the leading energy efficient consumer in the world. I think that this energy efficiency improvement need to play a key role to address the carbon neutrality. Firstly, energy efficiency improvement, and then clean up system by using the non-fossil fuel technology like renewable and nuclear power. And at the same time, I do believe that the electrification is a key word to achieve that carbon neutrality. And then the electricity sector should be zero emission. And for the promotion of electrification, again, AI, IoT, or digital technology need to play a key role, where I think that the United States and Japan can cooperate under the very difficult and uncertain that the geopolitical environment. And that, again, that the technology will play a key issue, and that's why U.S.-Japan cooperation should be very important. That's my very simple point.
You raise a good point about the synergies, Ken, between Japan technology and U.S. technology. And, I kind of want to, if you can, you and Christine can address this. We've been talking about the power sector, the electric sector, the electricity sector and power sector, which is very important, and decarbonization of the power sector, electric, gas, et cetera. But the transportation sector is also a key emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And I know both of you have experience in those sectors. So, Japan leads with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. U.S. is leading with, with the technology, with electric vehicle technology. So any ideas, or thoughts that you want to share, maybe some insights that might be productive for future collaboration on the transportation, or have you seen any of that from past partnering that U.S. and Japan did? Ken, do you want to go first, or Christine?
I think that in terms of the fuel cell vehicle technology, I think that one of the key issues is how to build the necessary infrastructure. And to build the infrastructure, I think that it's not sufficient only to pay attention to the sector of transportation. Or in other words, to build a bigger hydrogen society establishment is more important, which can substantially contribute to the zero emission of the overall economic system. So in this regard, that I think that one of the key areas that we can cooperate bilaterally is the concept of the hydrogen society. Not only transportation, I agree that the transportation is one of the key areas, but to wider concept, the hydrogen society concept can be the very important issue for both United States and Japan. And just for your information, that last year, IEJ made a special study for the long-term energy outlook for the world. In one special case studies, that the United States can become a significant exporter of CO2-free hydrogen to Asian market by utilizing your own fossil fuel. And this will also contribute to the hydrogen society building for your own nation. So I think that this is why wider concept can play an important role.
Yeah. Christine, any thoughts on that? I know that, currently U.S. is starting to lead, and California in particular, on green hydrogen because of a lot of the excess solar and wind now that's on our system. So maybe, Christine, if you could, give some comments on what Ken said about the hydrogen potential for renewable hydrogen, as well as any other comments in terms of the transportation sector decarbonization.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that green hydrogen is certainly a very key area that the California Energy Commission, certainly in our state of California, is very keen on. And, their view is that hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles are critical to our state's goal of getting, I think it's 1.5 zero emission vehicles on California roads, right, by 2025. And so that's 2025 is 5 years from now. So it's a very aggressive goal. Right now, with respect to battery powered electric, especially with respect to trucks, we carry all of our cargo here by trucks. Everything's trucked, right? Unfortunately, our rail infrastructure is not what it is in Japan. And so subsequently, that's a very big deal for us here in the United States, and with respect to especially long haul cargo, if you will. But in addition to that, there's a number of great projects that are currently underway leveraging green hydrogen for overall power. So just, for example, within the LA Department of Water and Power, we're building out a massive power plant, green hydrogen plant out in Utah that leverages salt caverns for energy storage. And so certainly we're starting to see a lot of investment here in the United States with respect to green hydrogen. But if I can add one last point, it's not just about the technology part and the ability to be able to meet market needs, both from an energy as well as transportation perspective, but candidly, from a jobs perspective, right? A lot of the existing infrastructure that we've got with respect to natural gas is something that can be leveraged for transportation of green hydrogen. And so from a job preservation or overall jobs numbers preservation and growth kind of perspective, we still need pipe fitters. A lot of the same skill sets that are being utilized in the oil and natural gas industries are something that we will need to help support the hydrogen market as well. And so I certainly see that, the building out of the hydrogen refueling infrastructure here in the United States, as well as with respect to power generation, is something that's going to be accelerating in the years to come.
Yeah.
Great, great. One more thing, in terms of, you talked about, and both of you addressed this in terms of bilateral and multilateral efforts. And I know in the Biden policy that Christine covered, there's a strategic and given Christine's background in financing, talk about developing a climate finance plan to make strategic bilateral partnerships. Christine, could you expand on that, and then we could get Ken's response, because that's another front and center aspect of the Biden administration plan for in the executive order as well that was issued today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that was a certainly very exciting point with respect to designating the Secretary of the Treasury to help out with developing a lot of these climate financing plans. I think certainly within the private sector, we've seen a number of developments in that field as well, not just with green banking and green bonds and ESG trading. And I say that in quotes because there's a lot of greenwashing. But, more specifically here, this is what's going to actually drive a lot more funding, through the United States government's investments, as well as interactions, if you will, with all of our partners internationally, perhaps through State Department, perhaps AID, if not, perhaps also directly through the Department of Energy's International Affairs Division, that I anticipate we'll be able to see a lot more interaction and collaboration thereof. I think, with the government's role, of course, it'll be much more focused perhaps on technology and technical assistance in that kind of exchange, as opposed to a development of new financial models, if you will. But I think that's certainly something that we'll be seeing through more activities from entities like the Development Finance Corporation and or, of course, other areas like the World Bank.
Ken, any perspectives that you want to share, any insights or additional?
Actually, that I totally agree with Christine's point. So I have very little to add, but my view is that the financing issue is really critical for the energy transition simply because that to achieve the carbon neutrality target, that the investment is the key, clean energy investment, and including that the clean energy related infrastructure is the key. And also the fact is that once that the investment or in energy-related facility and infrastructure is made, this is a very long-term or legacy investment. Once it is invested and the infrastructure is in place, it will be continue to exist for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So I think that the right appropriate financing mechanism is important. At the same time, my personal view is that in any cases, the energy transition to carbon neutrality requires a substantial cost or money or investment, and how to minimize the cost is another very important concept. In particular, of course, United States and Japan is, I would say, that rich countries as compared to the other part of the world. But if the two countries can work together to help the Asian countries for the good energy transition, I think that we need to pay attention to one of the reality in terms of the affordability of the energy price, and which requires that minimizing that transition cost. I think that to my personal view, it will also a very important issue that the United States and Japan can work together to help the Asian countries or Asian region or free open in the Pacific.
We have a very interesting question coming in from the audience now. So I'm gonna give some time for a little bit of Q&A time. I know we both have so much to say, and we did a little bit of dialogue here, but want to give the audience some participation time. So we're going to take questions from the audience. And one question that's come in, which really touches upon what Ken talked about, which is the demand side of the perspective. And I know both of you have familiarity with that from all your work in the energy area. That is there, what productive tools are there both in the Suga administration and in the Biden administration plan to address the demand side, whether that's, and I think Ken touched on that, energy efficiency. And, I think Hawaii has made that case as well, that, we can't get to 100% renewable energy without other resources in the toolkit like energy efficiency, demand response, being other tools, because you can't build enough power plants to be 100% renewable. You have to also manage load in addition to create increased supply. So can either of you, I think Ken finished last, so let's start with Christine to see if there's anything in the Biden administration plans that can address energy efficiency. I know there was a rollback of some of that and appliance standards under the prior administration, but what is the Biden administration doing? And then I'll let Ken, finish out the question since he did bring it up in his presentation.
Sure, absolutely. So with respect to, managing from the demand side as well as energy efficiency, the bottom line is yes, and. I think, the Biden plan ends up bucketing both of those two things together with respect to economic recovery and a lot of energy efficiency, right? It's about creating jobs in a lot of local regions, if you will, throughout the United States that help enable that. So from, I think one of his campaign promises was to invest in energy efficiencies and for commercial office buildings, for residences, for multifamily residences, et cetera. I think the numbers are like 4 million homes and 1 million commercial office buildings or something like that. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of funding that'll be coming to the various regions for that. With respect to energy efficiency, like a lot of the regulatory, as you touched upon, Lorraine, there's going to be I think there's going to be a massive rollback of a lot of the things that were done in the previous administration, to try to cut down on that. Candidly, I think it saves people money, and I don't understand. Yes. Why you would do something that doesn't help save, your citizens' money. And so I think that you will see a whole slew of a lot of energy efficiency related regulations coming down. One of the other executive orders that were signed today was a restoration of scientific integrity, if you will, within United States policy making. And I think a lot of the science, it's already there. So it's a matter of being able to bake that back in, if you will, into the regulatory agenda. And I think that you'll see that in spades coming very soon.
And to your point, Christine, that, energy efficiency, those types of demand side management technologies create jobs. I mean, there's a whole industry of energy efficiency contractors, of, energy efficiency auditors that, that's a tremendous skilled, high paid workforce opportunity that can be expanded. So, to your point, it is a locally implemented solution that has exponential, both national, not only state, but national and international import. So Ken, any thoughts on that from the Japanese perspective? I know you brought that up, and that seems to be a major pillar in the 3 E's that you're talking about from Japan perspective.
As I pointed out earlier, that I am a great believer that energy efficiency promotion is really key to address environmental issue, energy security issue, and economic efficiency issues. But I have to say that in case of Japan, because we made a serious investment and effort in the past, particularly after 1970s, the low-hanging fruit for energy efficiency for Japan is gone. In other words, marginal cost of promotion of energy efficiency for Japan is relatively high as compared to the other part of the world. That's the first bottom line for us. But nevertheless, we are determined to further promote energy efficiency by depending on the virtue of the new technology, as Christine pointed out, that the digital technology, information technology using demand-side management is one way, and also the possible social transformation or economic transformation by using the IoT or any new technology can play a very important role. This is based on the fact that during the very difficult time of pandemic last year, our oil demand declined very significantly. Of course, this was mainly because of the economic slowdown and restriction on travel. But restriction on travel is supported by using the webinar, teleworking, and whatever, that the social transformation tend to reduce the energy consumption pattern, and potentially there's a room of significant reduction of energy use or energy demand. So I think that technology-related social transformation may become another important source of big promotion of energy saving or energy efficiency improvement. And of course, even in Japan, there are another important area of energy efficiency promotion, for example, the building sector. And I think that we need to pursue every possible aspect of potential energy saving or potential energy promotion. Otherwise, it's very difficult for us to achieve the 3E goal simultaneously.
I think, and some of the folks in the question and answer chat have asked about, how important is it to get buy-in in various forms? What up until now, it's, there hasn't been a reaction to, energy conservation, climate change, but that seems to be changing. And, it's whether it's a prosumer environment, because now customers and the citizenry is more informed because we have social media and we have smart technology to help engage them. Any thoughts on that, like Christine and Ken? I'm going to start with Christine in terms of engaging, educating customers, whether that's, electric customers or individual citizens, to become more engaged in and part of addressing climate change, part of addressing energy, green energy, and doing things individually. Is that part of the both the Biden and Suga administration's strategies to involve the individuals more in this process? Because you can make all the kinds of national policies you want, but if you don't get buy-in, what happens? So Christine, any thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. I think, just maybe to start first with, how do we end up getting here to this point? In the United States, for decades now, we've had a number of folks, a fairly significant percentage of our population who, did not want to acknowledge the realities of climate change, had a fair share of our climate deniers, if you will. And I think one of the silver linings, to be political for a moment, of the last administration over the past 4 years is one of the big outcomes was the amount of both interest in actions and awareness and urgency with respect individuals, businesses, local governments took action on climate change. The degree to, the fact that you've got Larry Fink over at BlackRock now asking companies to disclose, what are all your climate risks, et cetera, is certainly very heartwarming for me to see, especially compared to 5 years ago, we were in government trying to implement or trying to get people to think about these policies is a lot like pushing string up a hill. So it's very gratifying, certainly for me to see that there's a lot more pull now from all these different entities. With respect to, how are we going to be doing this going forward and gaining buy-in? 100% absolutely. A lot of the solutions, that are, I think personally required to be able to help address climate change certainly require the intimate and the actual and the very hand-in-hand way of working forward with respect to getting a lot of these solutions out there, as I mentioned earlier, with respect to energy efficiency solutions and HVAC upgrades or lighting upgrades for homes, et cetera. That's a very local thing. Obviously, we have here in the United States a very, very divided populace right now from a political perspective. And so a lot of folks from the oil and gas and the coal industries have been feeling a lot of angst and anxiety with respect to what's going to happen from an overall jobs perspective, right? And it's something that I'm very sympathetic to. I like to half joke that my father was a photographer, old school, developed photos on film, et cetera. And I grew up smelling, photochemicals, if you will, because that's the kind of work that he did. But now everything that he did, we can do on these phones, right? So it's kind of ridiculous to me that everything and all the training that he had and the hours that he spent in the lab is something that I can do now with 2 fingers and then some, right? So I'm empathetic and very sympathetic to that. And so working hand in hand with a lot of those of the labor unions, the trade associations, et cetera, to help make that a reality that is doable and feasible and honors the sacrifices that they and their families have made over the past couple of decades is, I think, super critical.
Ken, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think that fundamentally that climate change crisis or environmental problem is a typical example of that externalities, which requires that additional cost if we really seriously address these externalities. And this means that if we really want to address these serious challenge, how to consumers, the consumers and the market stakeholder to react to the value of carbon or the cost of externalities is key issues. Of course, this is create another very, very sensitive political problem in domestically or internationally. But fundamentally, I think that externality issue requires a cost. And consumer and producer, investor need to understand this is fundamentally related to the issue of externality. That's why, if put it very simply, the pricing or taxation or whatever market mechanism related solution can be designed. But again, this is again very, very political question.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask one last question and just have you give real quick comments. We've got about 7 minutes left before we have to give it back to Suzanne and wrap up here. But we've got a lot of next generation professionals and next generation of leaders on. We've got the Tomodachi, program participants from USJC. And I wanted to just real quick, if you could sum it up in a couple, comments here, because we have the energy transformation, because of globalization, we're moving from many fossil fuel industries to new renewable energy. And there's some displacement there as industries go out. But there's opportunities with technology. What advice could you give someone thinking about either switching careers into clean tech, clean energy? Is there, and how we can engage younger professionals and the next generation of our, workforce, skilled workforce and leaders to get involved? Real quick. Christine?
Sure. Super quickly, I think it's fantastic. By the way, we welcome you with open arms, and I think it's certainly very much a vital need. With respect to how do you want to think about transitioning, if you're coming from a completely different industry, one thought for your consideration could be to make a functional play. So if you're a finance, let's say in consumer packaged goods, I'm making this up, is there a finance job that you can find in a clean energy, industry, et cetera, if you will, or if you're if you're actually working on the front lines with respect to, you're in oil and gas or you're in coal, is there a way that you might be able to help play either the functional play and or do a translation, if you will, of the skills that you're doing with respect to perhaps it's engineering, right? A lot of the initiatives that are going to be coming out of the Biden administration will also revolve around manufacturing of a lot of these clean energy technologies, whether it be like wind turbines, electric batteries, et cetera, in the various regions. And so that could also be a way for you to be able to translate your skill sets into the new industry.
Ken, any additional thoughts given what Japan's priorities are for making this transformation for the next generation of both workers and leaders?
Again, the one key issue is innovation. And innovation which makes this carbon neutrality and 3E goals achievement possible. And that will include the numbers of technology or infrastructure establishments like renewable technology and nuclear power, energy efficiency and hydrogen. And also, as Lorraine pointed out, I would like to encourage the young professional to try to find the best solution to make this transition in the least cost way. I think that transition requires cost, as I mentioned, but sometimes we need to think from the realistic point, what we can do to minimize the transition cost.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a lot happening in terms of innovation, grid technology. The young people that are in high schools and universities are just, it's a wealth of brain power there. So maybe the next suggestion for Suzanne would be to have a USJC sponsored hackathon, and we can invite all the young people who are interested in solutions to come as a hosted, as a participant for a USJC, hackathon. That would be a great event.
Great.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm going to turn it over thank you to our panelists, Christine Harada and Ken Koyama, and we'll turn it back over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much, and thanks for that suggestion, Lorraine. I echo your appreciation to our speakers. And also really, Lorraine, thank you for keeping that moving. There was so much information, so thank you very much. And I just want to say I share, I think that Christine's enthusiasm for the day and the moment in what's going on is very contagious. And thank you, I share that enthusiasm. I'm astounded by the number of questions that we had during this. I mean, first of all, Lorraine, you were able to get a lot of information in the conversation, but we had 25 questions, which is, I think, more than I've ever seen in one of these webinars. So clearly a lot of interest. We had talked in our September bilateral boardroom about the importance of taking the U.S.-Japan relationship to the next level. And we really think about that as how we, have problems to solve that we cannot solve by ourselves alone. And we really do need to work on together. And Ken, I thought your point about Japan has already hit all the low-hanging fruit, already harvested the low-hanging fruit. And so that really points to the challenge ahead of us and the importance of working together. So very excited. I will also say my big takeaway is kind of how massive this is. And, Christine started us off by thinking about how President Biden has framed this whole of government and even in the Treasury and as a security issue. And I think that really provokes for me a lot of thinking about what U.S.-Japan Council can and should do around this space. So thank you again, everybody, and please be part of the conversation. I also want to remind for our members and sponsors who have signed up for the follow-on session, you should have already received your connection information, and that conversation will continue in a few minutes. And thank you. Look forward to continuing the conversation with those of you. Before I close out, I do want to once again take this opportunity to thank our many sponsors for their support to the U.S.-Japan Council for events like this. And for those of you who like what you saw today and are not already supporting USJC, Please consider ways you can get involved, whether it's through contributions to the council, getting involved by attending other events, signing up for our newsletter, joining as a member, so forth. So we really do depend on all of you to make USJC a success. And lastly, I would like to let everybody know that we are planning our next virtual event as part of this Japan Perspectives series, which will focus on trends in the U.S.-Japan relationship and implications for Japan and East Asia. And so we'll be announcing that soon. So again, if you're on our newsletter, you'll get our upcoming events announcements and you won't miss it. So please keep your eye out for that conversation. So with that, I will wrap up and thank everybody for being with us today for this fantastic conversation and great turnout. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Keep healthy, keep safe.
See you.